Welcome to BookPilot, your destination for powerful ideas from the world's most impactful books. You know the exact feeling we're talking about today. It's late, the room is completely quiet, you're lying in bed just trying to get some rest, and suddenly your mind decides that right now is the absolute perfect time to replay something you said 3 days ago. Maybe it was a kind of strange joke, an awkward answer in a meeting, or my personal favorite, telling a waiter you too when they tell you to enjoy your meal. You remember the other person's exact expression, you remember your exact words, and then your brain just starts editing the scene. It rewinds it, changes what you could have said, and runs the whole conversation over and over again. You know the event is completely over, yet somehow it feels incredibly unfinished.
So, have you ever actually wondered why your mind does this? Why does it wait for the dead of night to edit, replay, and obsessively analyze an interaction from days or, let's be honest, sometimes even years ago? Well, most people just assume this happens because they're chronic overthinkers. But as we're going to explore today, that overly simple explanation actually misses something deeply important about human psychology.
See, during the day, you've got conversations, phone notifications, responsibilities, literally a million other thoughts competing for your attention. But when the room goes quiet and all those daily distractions finally fade away, your unfinished mental reviews suddenly become way easier to notice. And here's the real paradigm shift. Your brain isn't actually trying to punish you with embarrassing memories. I mean, if it wanted to punish you, why would it pick the exact moment you're just trying to sleep? Instead, you kind of need to look at your brain as a detective. It's actively trying to solve a perceived, unresolved problem.
Okay, let's dive into section 1, the science of rumination.
What you're experiencing at 2 a.m. is not just some random, weird quirk. Researchers actually have a clinical name for it, post-event processing. It's the repetitive mental review of a social interaction, and it kicks into absolute high gear, especially when an interaction felt uncertain or carried some kind of emotional weight. By anchoring this to a concrete scientific term, we can start to see that this isn't just you going crazy in the middle of the night. It's a very specific, well-documented cognitive mechanism.
And we really need to make a vital distinction here. Remembering is absolutely not the same thing as post-event processing. Simple remembering is just your memory providing the raw details of an event. Post-event processing, on the other hand, that is an active, exhausting investigation. You aren't just recalling the event, you're intensely examining your performance, generating all sorts of alternate responses, and agonizing over what another person might have thought of you afterward.
To really grasp how this works, let's look at some fascinating psychological research. Todd Kasdan and John Roberts studied college students having structured conversations with strangers. They found that for people with higher social anxiety, the conversation literally didn't end when the talking stopped. Internally, their minds kept treating the finished event as an active task, engaging in this negative post-event rumination. Then you have Julie Morgan and Robin Banerjee, who looked at autobiographical memory. Their key finding is huge. They discovered that a ruminative thinking style actually shapes which memories become emotionally significant in the first place. This means our internal analysis after an event fundamentally alters how we experience and interpret the memory itself. When you inspect an experience over and over, a tiny awkward moment begins to feel massive simply because you keep feeding it mental energy.
Let's move to section 2 and see how this builds. Why we replay conversations.
So why exactly does this internal mental detective reopen these specific case files? Well, psychological research points to 3 core drivers that essentially force the brain to keep reviewing conversational evidence: unresolved uncertainty, lingering emotional processing, and threats to our sense of self. Let's break these down one by one so you can recognize exactly what your own brain is doing.
Driver number 1 is unresolved uncertainty. Sometimes a conversation replays in your head simply because your mind never got a satisfying answer. Did they understand you? Did they secretly dislike what you said? Was that slight, tiny pause before they answered actually meaningful? When the answer feels unclear, your brain basically treats your memory like an old group chat, desperately scrolling back through looking for a clue you might have missed. But the catch is, memory rarely provides absolute certainty. Every new interpretation just creates yet another question, keeping the whole loop running.
Driver number 2 is lingering emotional processing. A lot of the time, a conversation comes back to haunt you, not because of the actual words that were spoken, but because it carried an emotion that never got your full attention during your busy day. Stuff like embarrassment, disappointment, or feeling rejected. Your mind circles this lingering emotion. So instead of trying to figure out what exactly did they mean, the real, deeper question your brain is wrestling with is, why did this make me feel so exposed? Now, what's really interesting here is this third and deepest driver, threats to our sense of self.
Social interactions are basically how we gather data about how we're valued in the world. You might make a tiny, trivial conversational mistake, like a stutter or a slightly awkward sentence, but your mind connects that tiny error to a massive existential identity concern. Suddenly, you aren't just reviewing one sentence, you're evaluating what that moment says about your core identity, asking yourself, wait, do people think I am totally incompetent? This is exactly why a passing comment can stick with you for years, because your actual identity feels like it's on the line. So why in the world does this become such a persistent, annoying habit? Well, because replaying conversations creates a temporary but highly misleading sense of control. For a brief, fleeting moment, analyzing the memory makes you feel like you're actively doing something to fix your discomfort. Your mind learns that when uncertainty or negative emotion pops up, reviewing the conversation is a tool you can use. Eventually, this pattern becomes entirely automatic. You get into bed, the room gets quiet, you feel a tinge of uncertainty, and boom, the replay loop just begins without you even consciously choosing to start it. Which brings us to Section 3, How to Break the Loop. The good news? You are absolutely not doomed to endless midnight reruns. We can shift the narrative right now. So the crucial point is this. There are 3 concrete, science-backed steps you can take to stop being a passive victim and interrupt the rumination cycle. 1. Notice and name the loop. 2. Identify the underlying concern. And 3. Deliberately shift your attention. Let's walk through exactly how you can put these into practice tonight. Step 1 is just pausing to actively name what is happening. The exact moment you feel the mental replay starting, say to yourself, out loud if you have to, I am reviewing that interaction because something about it still feels unresolved. This simple little sentence is incredibly powerful. It creates immediate psychological distance between you and the mental investigation. You are no longer automatically falling down the rabbit hole. You've stepped back to observe the pattern itself. Once you've paused, step 2 is identifying and responding to that underlying concern. Is it uncertainty? Is it embarrassment? A fear of being judged? Once you spot the real issue, address it directly. You have to accept that your memory cannot magically manufacture new facts that were never there in the first place. Acknowledge the emotion, tell yourself it is totally okay to feel embarrassed or unsettled, but do it without turning your memory into a hostile courtroom trial where you cross-examine every second of the past. Stop searching for answers that simply aren't in the memory. And this brilliantly illustrates our final step, which is the massive difference between suppression and attention shifting. You might think the goal is to just force the uncomfortable memory away, but suppression, trying really hard not to think about it, actually makes unwanted thoughts way more noticeable and a lot stronger. Instead, use deliberate attention shifting. Notice the thought, sure, but don't reward it with another mental investigation. Move your attention to something concrete in the present moment. Your breathing, the hum of the AC, the physical feeling of your blankets. You are actively training your brain to change its default response pattern. Look, the goal here isn't to guarantee that an old, awkward conversation will literally never pop into your head again. The goal is to strip away its power so you're no longer compelled to chase it down at 2 a.m. So I'll leave you with this final thought for the next time your brain reopens one of these cold cases at midnight. Pause and ask yourself, what are you actually looking for? Because the truth is, your mind isn't asking you to rewrite the past. It's asking you to understand what that past interaction still means to you today. Figure that out, close the file, and finally get some well-deserved sleep. If you enjoyed this audiobook summary and want to discover more powerful ideas from great books, subscribe to BookPilot and stay tuned for more.